Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Following the second day of the Congress, we are organizing Acoustic Communication, an interdisciplinary approach. You are welcome. And in this second day, we will have another talks, and I hope you will enjoy and have a good day and a very useful day for all of us. I will ask Tanya to continue the event. Tanya, please.
Good morning and good evening for those who are in a different time zone. I'm very honored to be here today, and I'm going to be here to support if there's any technical issues. I hope not, but I'll be here anyway. Today is the second day and this great event, and I want to call Bruna Campos Paula. She'll be the moderator of this session. And please, Bruna, you have the voice.
Okay, Tanya, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good evening. Today we will begin with an interesting research topic. I have the pleasure to present to you Athos Damiani. Athos is a statistician at the University of São Paulo. Currently, he is a master's student in the School Polytechnic at the University of São Paulo. He is studying automatic acoustic detectors of nocturnal bird species under supervision of Professor Vinicius Padovese and Professor Paulo Hubert. Today, he will present to us his work with the automatic detection of bird species by sound using the R software. Okay, let's start. Athos.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruna. First of all, I would like to thank you, everyone here, the staff, the organizers, Bruna, especially for the invitation. For me, it's an honor. I'm just debuting my career as a researcher, as a master's student. So for me, it's pretty awesome opportunity to be here. Okay. A little bit about me and my work here. I'm working on a project, as Bruna says, called Automated Bird Species Recognition based on their songs. And this picture here summarizes pretty much what I'm going to do in this project. I'll take some data about the birds and then try to classify them automatically. So the keyword here is supervised machine learning, and my supervisors, my advisors are Professor Vinicius Padovese and Paulo Hubert, for whom I own the honor to be part of this team. Let me talk first about the Laboratory of Acoustics environment, which is where I'm working right now. It's headed by Professor Vinicius, and it's in the Department of Engineering in USP, University of São Paulo in Brazil. And the main goal is wildlife preservation through monitoring. So this is the first, the means that we found to do actions in wildlife preservation, and the laboratory has this goal. It produces its own hardware, softwares, and data sets, research, and everything. Okay. And what I'm going to do in this project, in my master's, will be first a literature review as any good master's student. I'll build an automatic detector for the 5 birds that we chose, all species. And if I were successful, I will scan out 5 terabytes of soundscape that was collected by the laboratory to spot out these birds in it. For today, I will talk about my findings and my perceptions about the literature review until this point. and some early experiments and partial results. Okay, just a disclaimer: I'm really new in this field. I'm learning throughout this year, and this presentation has a lot of opinionated statements. So is for discussion, is not about the truth or anything. So do not please offend or find some things that is wrong. Okay, I will just jump in my conclusions before I justify them. What I found in the literature review about species recognition tasks was, first, deep learning methods are proving to be the best approach for this. And second, annotated data sets needed is the second issue that I found until now. Okay, so I will discuss this. I will justify these findings. Well, there's a outstanding review made by PRAAT Darshani, Marsland, and Castro in 2017, which they compiled a full list of methodologies that were used to tackle this problem of bird species recognition. And I could see that there's a plethora of methods, setups, data representations, and approaches to do, and any combinations of them, like Markov models, random forest, deep learning, SVM. You can represent your data as simply the raw data, spectrograms, MEL spectrograms, MFCC, by far the most used representation, and so on. The list is extensive, and for each specific problem, the researcher choose the most the better for them. But what stands out for me is was the success of deep learning in several approaches. 2 months ago, there was a challenge in Kaggle platform, which is the goal is to challenge people to build a bird classifier, just as what I have to do in my master's. And what I found out, I took a glance in each one of the top 12 works, and every single one used a representation like MEL spectrogram or MFCC, and deep learning for the classifier, especially the CNN, which means convolutional neural network, is a specific architecture from deep learning suited for images. And every single winner of the competition used this approach. Would, for me, jump to my eyes this statistics. Also, another curiosity, every single one used the PyTorch framework, which is a incredible tool to make deep learning models. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about this later. But yes, this is the scenario. Also, I search for other source of challenges regarding bird audio, bird classification. Free and also not just birds, but also whales or a general purpose audio modeling. And once again, I found out that CNNs was majority the winner solution. I found just one exception, which was in a whale detection challenge, that the winner used template matching, and this was the best approach in this challenge, which means that another approach is still have the value, but by judging by the volume of winner solutions using CNN, I conclude that this is at least one thing to experiment in my work. Here I put an example. Oh, sorry. Well, this is an example of a paper that describes one of these winner solutions, and you can see CNNs, PyTorch, MEL spectrograms, and this is in what I could see that this is the main approach that nowadays the researchers are taking. I myself performed some experiments, pretty early experiments, I must say. There's a lot of things that I have to test yet, but I could see the potential of the use of the deep learning methods. Here I perform a classifier using MFCC and light GPM, which is a gradient boosting machine flavor, pretty similar with random forest. It's a tree-based model, and the performance was pretty reasonable, was okay, 87% of accuracy. But at my first try using CNNs on the raw audio, I already could achieve a better result. And based on another paper that used MEL spectrogram and ResNet, I also tried, and I already had a even better performance. And I must say, this is what was a quick win. I didn't put so much effort by building this architecture. Just for curiosity, this name is ResNet and stuff is reusable pieces of deep learning that another research made, which is a interesting feature when we can easily reproduce some product that another research already done in this area. So yes, this was a interesting result, and there is a lot more to come yet. Ideas like rectangular kernels in CNNs. Usually we use I squared 1. Rectangular could fit pretty well in this problem. Stacking models, instead of use just one model, you could use several models at once with synergy. And of course, a dozen of tweaks and experimentations in FFT parameters, pre-processing in the raw audio, filtering, slices, and so on. Is still more to come in these experimentations. But I am already convinced that deep learning will be the main approach that I will take to solve this problem. Some discussion and opinion, my opinion, personal opinion, about what is good and what's bad of deep learning. Well, one subtle advantage here is the automatic feature engineering. I will talk about this in the next slide. In contrast with the human-crafted feature engineering, and also the powerful performance that it provided right away. Even when dealing with noisy audios, this is one thing that I noticed also. The audios that I'm dealing are pure from the nature, and these results are on this data, so it performed well. It was a good news. Also, they are modular and easy to share, easy to reuse, and easy to reproduce, which is a value that we have in scientific community. Also, there are some outstanding tools like PyTorch or like TensorFlow. They are pretty human friendly in certain way to build these complex models. So it worth it to know more about it. And they has the focus on us researchers. They say they are research and production first. So and in one work you can build your model and put it on, embark it in a hardware and of any size, which is pretty rich for us. And that to be fast, you don't have to be any computer engineering genius to make things work as they should. So this whole framework around deep learning has value, on my opinion. Some cons, obviously, is not a trivial field to master. It requires a lot of study, but I think it's payoffs pretty quickly. Okay, and the big problem here is this approach requires a large amount of data, as stated by Professor Silvia Orlandi on her outstanding talk about the automated detection of cry melody in newborns. She is also she's switching for deep learning methodology, and also spot out this problem. And just a little illustration of what I'm saying about handcrafted versus automatic feature engineering. Traditionally, a researcher would have to forge some features to extract, for example, a pattern from an image of any kind. And usually they will have to draw out some forms here and then pass like a convolution operation upon an image. The new paradigm, the new way, the deep learning way of doing these things, that we delegate this task of doing handcrafted feature to the machine. So we train the best kernel for this problem. You don't have to forge anymore. You let the machine learn this pattern, which is pretty rich. It's a data-driven kernel. You don't have to, from prior knowledge or any hint, try to figure out this pattern. So this is a big deal. Okay, this was my findings about deep learning and why I chose to use it first. The second problem that I faced was the annotated data sets. This was my biggest pain until now. When I started to work in this project, I thought that would be just gather some data and apply a classifier, but ends out that this wasn't available for me and wasn't even close to be an easy task to do. As the Marsland Castro said in their paper, quote, "It is important that benchmark data sets are available so that different researchers can compare their methods on the same data set using the same metrics. This is key for the development of any area in this approach. Also, quote, "There is the need of shared data sets with annotations of a wide variety of calls for a large number of species if methods that are suitable for conservation work are to be developed." So we researchers need to have access to labeled data. And by this time, it's pretty rare. It's not a easy thing to gather. And one good news was I discovered that there are a data set culture in machine learning community or users. For example, PyTorch make available inside their own framework a set of data sets ready to use. I put here an example that which one line of code, you ask the program to download and load in your memory the whole data set that is the same data set used by all the others, and you can then perform your work. And I put here also just one line of code that I sample one instance, and you can see that already have the data in my computer. So it's pretty convenient. And it's just like any publish, any contribution you can cite. There is a celebrity data sets around the community where everybody uses, everybody loves to work with. So this is a relevant contribution to make. And by motivated by this culture, we are planning as a side product of our work, make available our data set that we will build for everyone in the same fashion. A function, in this case for our users, that is easy to use. You just ask for the computer to download the data and you are ready to go. We do have some awesome sources of audio data about birds, but they are not machine learning ready. And also we have awesome data sets about birds machine learning ready, but without any Brazilian birds in it. So there is no perfect world here. And one of our side tasks is to build one for the community. Of course, not built it yet, not published yet, but soon. And also, there's a lot of side products in this work. I found out there is a easy way to fetch MP3 data from Canto using the Warbler R package by Marcelo Araya Salas. With one line of code, you can bring for your machine tons of MP3 files for you work with. And what we did was make a version for Wikiavis website repository to do the same. So now we got two sources of audios ready to be fetched, and a lot of species to be studied yet. Here's an example of the amount of data that I collected to build my data set. And here's just a list. I will not talk about this, but just a list of side products that I think would be useful for anyone that uses R to perform an end-to-end task of bird species recognition, because right now it's kind of painful to do so. So there would be a package for download, package for annotated audio, package for modeling, and package for reproduce the whole research. That was it. Here's some references, and I would like to thank you everybody again.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, Athos. And let's do the questions. Professor Patricia asked a question about the formation. So act in this area. She asked what formation someone needs to work with deep learning. I mean, if I had to look someone to help me with that, and what exactly is that PyTorch?
Okay. Well, I think my background is statistics. So let me say, if anyone is used to use like linear models or predictive modeling, you are ahead like 80% a way to learn deep learning. So deep learning is just a step further of the linear models. There is even a post that says that the logistical regression is a specific case of deep learning. So everything that logistical regression do by what it's made to do, the theory around it, is applied to deep learning also. And so if you have this knowledge, you are near to master deep learning technique. Also, another skill that is valuable in this scenario is the programming skills. If you are comfortable in writing code already, you are going to feel more comfortable using the deep learning frameworks. There is few programs that allows you to perform a deep learning without coding. So this is a restriction nowadays. And yes, that's it. I think to summarize the answer is statistical mathematical background, a predictive modeling background, and also a programming skills background.
Okay. We have another question of Professor Patricia. What is a noted data set? And what kind of information it stores, and how can it be used by others?
Great question. Well, annotated data sets are, in this context, is when you know where the event happened in your audio, like in this case, when the bird sung. This is important to us to know because we have to associate the data that the bird made with him, with the fact that it was him there. So label data is this example here. You have a soundscape and you label this data like so. You draw out a region and tell to the machine, this is a I don't know, an owl. And then you go to another region and say, no, this is a frog, and this is an insect. And this is important for the machine learning framework. You have to tell the machine what is going on in this particular region. And this is the label data that I meant.
Okay. We have a questions of Rogério Grassetto. Athos, do you think the compression of MP3 files in WikiAvis and channel Canto may interfere with automated detection?
Please, Athos, can I just ask you to stop the presentation, please?
Oh,
sorry
sure.
to interrupt. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Repeat the question.
Yes.
Athos, a question of Rogério Grassetto. Do you think the compression of MP3 files in WikiAvis and channel Canto may interfere with automatic detection?
Well, I will say what I think. I think that is not a imperative to do classifiers. In my experiments, I could retrieve information and achieve some accuracy. But of course, if the more resolution, the better. But it's by far not an imperative. Even what I study also, that when we are performing building a deep learning architecture, sometimes we apply by in purpose we lower the resolution by purpose. So it was not an obstacle at all.
Okay. Another question of Vitor Rios. Is PyTorch biologist friendly? Installation and interface?
Oh, it's highly, in my vision, and the installation is straightforward, at least in R, because we literally run just one line of code, and everything is set up for you automatically. I don't know much about Python, but in R is straightforward. The interface is pretty personal, I think. For me, it is convenient, and I have some good times using it. It's like a building blocks. But I have I like to program, so maybe this is why I got along with the PyTorch interface. So yeah, if you already are used with programming practice, PyTorch is friendly. Yeah, but not as friendly as TensorFlow.
Okay. Now we have a question of Professor Regis Rossi. The question is could he talk more about what libraries in R are available for datasets importing and process?
Okay. Let me, I think, should I show? Well, I will speak it. I think that the Torch, PyTorch, Torch for R, and everything about Torch has a rich set of tutorials and data sets and a community around it, building things in the daily basis. So if you want to know more, I recommend you to reach out to this community. They are pretty accessible, and they write a lot about in the research area specifically. So yes.
Bruna, I think your microphone is closed.
Another question of Vitor Rios. How does PyTorch deal with overlapping sounds? There are some detection packaging R, but that have trouble with that.
Yeah, I think this is a problem, of course, but this problem is in the data set layer, right? If you annotate if you didn't give the labels that happen in the same moment, you will not perform a good classifier. Also, the deep learning can, if you have enough data, do a good job in these situations with overlapping sounds. Okay, and there's some research. There's a paper that it uses a different architecture that is a rectangular kernel that considers the different region of the in frequency domain of the events. So if you have two events happen in different areas of the spectrum, different frequencies, the method, the framework, the model will perform well as well. I don't know if I was clear. Sorry about my English.
Okay, good. Okay. A question of Larissa Sayuri. How would these methods functions for target signals way less complex than birds? Example, some frog species from audios containing high background noise.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. Could you repeat?
How would these methods functions for target signals way less complex than birds? Some examples, some frog species from audios containing high background noise.
I don't have experience, and I don't have life experience in another context. What I know is that the audios that I'm dealing now, they have noise. They are pretty noisy, like rain, some human interference, wind, insects, bugs, everything that have happened in nature, the audio has. So this is the data I'm using. If your data is similar, I can tell that this methodology is capable of separate the signal from this noise.
Okay. A question of Rogério Grassetto. Maybe MP3 could be an issue for songs and vocalization that go up in frequency range.
An interesting question. Like there always will be the feature engineering to consider the modulation, but one thing that's interesting in deep learning is that it will look to the shape of any event, any sound event. So if you have a particular shape that goes up and down, for example, it will treat it like an image. It is pretty much the same approach as the computer vision perform in any task regarding images. Like, I need to detect an apple. So the apple has a shape. I need to detect a banana. Banana has a particular shape. Doesn't matter where it is in the image. And this approach is the state of art to detect those kind of objects with specific shapes. So if we imagine that the bird song that do modulation or whale sound that has a specific shape, this will be straightforward for this task also.
Okay. I have a question. What makes a bird vocalization appropriate to using automatic detection?
Bird's vocalization, what does it mean? Sorry.
What makes the bird vocalization appropriate to using automatic detection?
Oh, great. It's a great question. One magical tool that we have is the spectrogram or the Fourier transform that make possible us to see the sound. So the bird vocalization has some signature, has some shape that is specific, that is clear for that species. So the bird vocalization is the signature of that bird, which allows us to identify them by distance. You can put a microphone in an area which would be hard to some professional to reach, and we detect the sound, and we can tell automatically by this signature that he emits. So this is why a sound signature is amazing for monitoring.
Okay. Okay, Ats, we reached the end of your speech. Any other questions can send to your email. Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation and your answer on the question. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Athos, for your great presentation. I will ask, please, I want to take this opportunity to ask participants to fill the attendance list. There is a link in YouTube. You can see it's near the schedule. So please, please fill it. It's it takes only 2 minutes, and it's important for us to know who are the participants who are here with us. So please fill this form. The next talk is scheduled for 10 past 10. Should we wait, Patricia, Emma?
I think we should wait.
Okay, so we will have a break, 10 minutes break, and we'll be back at exactly 10 past 10 a.m. Thank you. Good morning, we're back. I want to remind to fill our attendance list that is on YouTube, on the link, please, so we can know who you are, who are participating in our event. Now I would like to ask Fraulein, Professor Fraulein Vidigal de Paula to present our invited speaker. Thank you, Fraulein.
Thank you, Tanya. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to participate in this wonderful event. I thank the organizers for inviting me to mediate Professor Plínio's conference. Professor Plínio Barbosa obtained his Ph.D. degree by the Institut National Polytechnique de Grenoble in France. He is associate professor of Department of Linguistics of Institute of Language Studies at the State University of Campinas and responsible for the Speech Prosody Studies Group, a team of research and students working on analysis and modeling of speech prosody. He has published more than 150 papers in experimental prosody, including studies of speaking styles, coordination of respiratory and speech activities, speech rhythms and intonation, cross-linguistic comparisons of prosodic structures and speaking styles, and related subjects. He's author of 3 wonderful books, Inclusion Around Rhythm of Speech, Manual of Experimental Acoustics Phonemics with Professora Sandra Madureira, and the more recent, Prosodia. He is a member of the Council of the International Phonemics Association and of the Educational Committee of the same association. Before giving the floor to the speaker, I remember everyone that the questions are welcome and can be posted on the YouTube chat for later approach. So, Professor Plínio, it's with you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraulein. Thank you, the organization team. I'm sharing my screen, and I will start by presenting you some slides about some information about speech, and then I will do demonstrations using PRAAT. Okay, are you seeing my slide here?
Yes, Plínio.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. The title of the presentation is The Use of the PRAAT Software in Acoustic Analysis. For doing so, I first present the basic elements of speech production and acoustics, and after that, I will present to you the main techniques for acoustic analysis in PRAAT, illustrating them by the choice of annotation in speech signal, also in animal vocalizations, spectral, duration, fundamental frequency, and intensity analysis. One of the main features of PRAAT is the possibility of scripting, that is, writing programs to make analysis completely automatic. I'm not presenting them today, but in the corresponding paper, I have a lot of some information about that. Okay, this is the PRAAT web page. You can find the web page at this address. It's very simple, and these two guys are the authors of PRAAT, Barbosa and David Winnick, from the University of Amsterdam, and PRAAT can be downloaded for several operational systems that you can see here at the left. Okay. PRAAT has a group list discussion, a lot of information about how to be introduced in the use of the software. Okay, just as a reminder, in the case of speech, of course, in the case also of animal vocalization, the main source of sound energy is the coordination of the respiratory and the laryngal subsystems. Here at top left, you can see the movement of the muscles for breathing for a speech. You can see the movement of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles as well. And these muscles in the active phase are responsible for the inhalation phase of respiration for speech. As you can see here in these ellipses, the inhalation for the speech is much deeper than inhalation for normal breathing at the left. And this ensures the maintenance, the activity of the muscles. You can see here also the activity of the abdomen ensures the maintenance of the subglottal pressure sufficient for a long phase of expiration where the majority of the sounds of the language are made. Okay, the flow of air that expirates and crosses the vocal folds that you can see here, bottom right, generates this kind of signal, which is very asymmetric, which explains the harmonics of this kind of energy. As you can see here, this is the closing phase of the signal, which is very fast, and this is the opening phase, which is much slower than the closing phase due to different forces acting in this across the vocal folds. After crossing the vocal folds, the air flows through the vocal tract, which acts as a filter. Here at the right, you can see the main positions where the approximation of the active articulator towards the passive articulator produces also other sources of energy like turbulent air for plosives and fricatives. At the left, you can see fMRI image video showing the movement of the tongue, the velum, the lips, and also the larynx. Okay. The kind of modification ensured by the filter, which is the activity of the function of the vocal tract, which is responsible for generating what are called formants and antiformants. Formants are the regions where the energy is intensified, and antiformants the regions where the energy is absorbed because it's trapped in some part of the vocal tract cannot flow through the lips. This speech signal explained since the acoustic theory of speech production by Bruna in the 60s by the application of this energy, either a voiced source or unvoiced source that can be flow through the vocal tract separated or in combination, and this sound energy flows through the vocal tract, which acts as a filter to produce this speech signal. Okay. I have here some illustration. This is the spectrum of the vocal folds, and this is the spectrum at the lips. Then this spectrum is produced, as I said, by at the region of the vocal folds. It sounds like this. And And after crossing the vocal tract, depending on the configuration of the articulators, produces a completely different sounds. Here is an illustration of the vowel sounds. Here you have at the middle a configuration for the E. Here you have configuration for the A. And here configuration for the U. And this configuration can be produced just by moving the articulators. For U, the tongue is at the posterior part of the vocal tract. For E, all this tony body is the front part, and for A, at the pharyngeal part and very low in the vocal tract. Okay, since the 1940s, with the construction, the building of the spectrograph, we can see, because this was called visible speech by that time, the components, the frequency components and the activity both of the vocal folds and the vocal tract with this diagram, which is called the spectrogram. This is a broadband spectrogram. Here, these very black regions are the regions of the formants, and these vertical lines represent the voicing, the vibration of the vocal folds. This is a period of occlusion for a T in this example. This is another period of occlusions with which is called the voicing band for the B in Portuguese, and this is the principle of the spectrogram, which is a bank of filters in a certain band of frequency from which we can calculate the energy and draws with different levels of gray, proportional with this energy across time and across frequency, explaining the black and the different and the regions of these different levels of gray. Okay, at the top here we have the waveform for speech, and at bottom the corresponding broadband spectrogram for a sentence, for utterance in Portuguese. Okay, here you can see this is a region of fricatives. This is a region of diphthong, and different sounds can be visualized from left to right. For demonstrating PRAAT, I will show you the features of annotation, spectral duration F0, and intensity analysis. Now I will, I hope that you are seeing this. Are you seeing this? Okay, at the left you have the objects window from PRAAT, and here at the right you have the PRAAT picture window. Okay, here you have the sound and the annotation. As you saw here, I select both the sound and the annotation. As you can see, you have only 5 buttons to do analysis, because in PRAAT the buttons are dynamic. If I choose the sound object, for instance, you can see a lot of buttons. For instance, because from a sound file you can do periodicity analysis, the calculation of 0 here, harmonic to noise ratio, and we can compute the spectrum, the long-term spectrum, short-term, long-term spectrum, formants, LPC analysis, Mel capture analysis, intensity, etc. Okay, and filtering. I will show you some filtering techniques. By going back to choosing both the sounds and clicking on View and Edit, here you can see that this window for speech.
Em seguida apareceu papagaio real.
The reading of a passage from Monteiro Lobato. Em seguida apareceu papagaio real. Here I decide as a researcher to annotate in 4 tiers, the sentence, words, syllables, and phones. Here you can hear
Apareceu papagaio
the words,
real, papagaio, apareceu
the syllables,
guia,
and the phones. Of course, this is just an explosion. Okay. As you can see, there are these menus here: spectrum, pitch, and testing, format, and process, allow us to see some acoustic parameters, and also to compute, for instance, Fourier spectrum in a certain position of along the signal. For instance, if I decide to compute a Fourier analysis spectrum at the middle of this A, I can put my cursor here and adapt the spectrum to a spectrum of called oh my God, I forgot the name. Broadband and my God.
Narrow band?
Narrow band, sorry, narrow band spectrogram. You can see now a narrow band spectrogram, and by using this menu, I can compute this spectrum. And this is this spectrum at the middle of the R. We have a first formant of 600 Hertz, a second formant of 1000 Hertz, and here we have the harmonics. The distance between the harmonics is F0, about 130 Hertz in this case. Okay, I will go back to the spectrogram, the broadband spectrogram. And here we have an example of animal vocalization. You have here the guinea pig courtship vocalization. Okay, here I use the annotation to separate the pulses. And here I use a point tier to mark a position where I could, where I can, where I may compute, for instance, a Fourier spectrum. This is important because you can go back to this point and see if the point was well chosen, or if there's an error in choosing this point for measuring. Okay, I will demonstrate the filtering technique. We can compute, for instance, the rhythm, the rate of this sound. Of course, it is very simple. You can just pick the whole duration, 939 milliseconds, and divide by the number of pulses and do the inverse of that. You have the number of pulses per second, but you can also doing that by filtering. Here I filter the sound at 350 Hertz. And this is important because the pulses were emphasized. And then we can compute the spectrum of this sound here. And the distance between the harmonics is the rate of this. Okay, here, 16 Hertz, 16 pulses per second. How can that be done filtering? Filtering in PRAAT is very simple. Choose the sound, you click on the filters menu, and you choose the kind of filter you want. For instance, the passband filter or the low band filter. If I decide to filter between 0 and 350, I just inform here, and I will obtain the filter sound. Okay. Here we have again the same thing. Computer by using the annotation, 16 pulses per second, and then I can also annotate, for instance, the duration of these pulses or the duration of the main formants of these pulses from here to here, for instance, about 30 milliseconds. For demonstrating, I have time, I hope so.
3 minutes now.
Okay. Here we have an example of capybara barking, danger, feeding behavior. I thank the team and by Patricia and Adriana that sent to me these files for. Okay, and I computed the spectrum of these two kinds of barking in capybaras. We were able during the PhD of Adriana to demonstrate, to show differences in the energy in certain frequency bands. Here you can see that the black line spectrum is the spectrum of the danger situation, the red line is the feeding situation, and we demonstrate that the differences in relative intensities from high frequencies to the low frequency to 1000 Hertz, where there's a, as you can see here, there's a concentration level between 10 and 15 kilohertz, and also in this middle region of energy, which allows us to distinguish the two kinds of barking in capybaras. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And if you have questions, I'll be delighted to answer to them.
Thank you a lot, Plínio, for your talk. It's very interesting, this subject. And we have now any questions by the chat of YouTube. And you are true an audience of more than 60 people.
Can I ask you, Plínio, to stop the presentation, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Patricia has the question for you. Plínio, if you had to look for very fine mirror differences in the speech between humans, for instance, monozygotic twins living in the same family.
I don't know if I correctly understood, but what kind of a parameters did you use it to differentiate twin voices? Is that
Frau, eu tive que quebrar. Oh, sorry.
I had, okay.
Yeah, you have to read below because the question is not out there. I had to cut this in 3 lines.
If you perhaps, Patricia, you have you can pose your question here.
Okay, I will do that. I will take there and insert here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have already 3 questions here in the chat. Could I respond to them or not?
Sure, you can, Plínio.
Okay, the first one is what kind of acoustic analysis we can do with audio records of low quality as MP3 or Athos considering the codec PCM? Okay, we can do a lot of analysis. The problem with MP3, for instance, it's a codification that compacts the speech signal. Some kind of different kinds of information pieces of information are lost, but depending on the kind of analysis we want to do, this is not a problem. For instance, you have a difference in F0 by using MP3 audios at about 4 or 5% of differences between the original, the PCM one, and the MP3. And normally it's not a big deal, okay? The main problem is the rate of the digitalization rate, the presence of noise. These are the main problem, but not so much certification, okay? The next question is, how would you compare PRAAT with the widely used commercial software such as Resin and AppSoft or the ARC packages such as Z-Wave and the like? Okay. It's difficult to answer to that because I don't use them. And but I'm very I know that the majority of our phonetic community uses PRAAT. And this, if you have some training, of course, it's not so easy to start with. But if you have some training, it's very easy to do scripting, to do different kinds of analysis, to do perception experiments. Okay, you can modify any kind of a parameter. We can need to rely on automatic or already available automatic devices to present results as duration, F0, etc. We can do everything from scratch. I don't know, it's difficult to say because I don't know that. What's the minimum training required of what a priori knowledge is needed to use PRAAT? For the basic things, we don't need a lot of information. I think some hours of introduction to PRAAT, we can use basic things. It depends on your knowledge on acoustic phonetics. That's the main problem. If you don't have a lot of knowledge on acoustic phonetics, then to use PRAAT could be very hard. But a lot of introduction into internet, you have courses here at the UNICAMP as well. If you had to look for every fine minor difference in the speech between two humans, for instance, when one is brought twins to live in the same family, what you investigate a word, a vowel, sentence, they sing the same. Okay. In fact, we can investigate everything. We can investigate prosody, which means rhythm and melody. In the study by my student, he found some difference in terms of rhythm, and he also found some difference in terms of formants for vowels and movements of formants, and they seem to be different for some pairs of twins at least, not all of them. They differ in some degree, of course. But it's necessary to check everything. It's necessary to have a lot of data to point to differences between twins. I don't know if I answered you, Patricia. But, Another question. When the vocal apparatus produces voiced sounds, we don't analyze formants. I don't understand. So in complex high-frequency strokes or carnivores, why it's not possible to find formant frequencies? The first part says, when the vocal apparatus produces voiced sounds, you don't analyze formants. I don't know in what cases. In speech, of course, you analyze formants.
I think I understand what she's asking. Someone would say that we cannot use PRAAT when we have a very tonal call. So that PRAAT would be better to investigate noisy sounds. I mean, not harmonic sounds. If it's true, how can the vocal apparatus, so in complex high frequency calls of carnivores, why it is not possible to find formant frequencies? So when you have an harmonic call, how to find formants that are not? For example, the whistle of the guinea pig. You have the fundamental frequency and some harmonics there, and they are really fine, a fine line in the FFT. Is there 4 months?
It's not a problem of PRAAT, it's a problem of spectral analysis in general. It's not related to PRAAT. It's difficult to find formants. It was the same thing in the beginnings of acoustic phonetic analysis with the voices of children, for instance. Because if the harmonics are very separated and the formants are in between two harmonics, for instance, it's almost impossible to detect where the formant is. Of course, if you add some noise between the harmonic, I think it can happen with animals. We can, in certain way, to find how can I say, a path to at least to have some ideas where formants could be. But it's not simple for spectral analysis to detect formants where, in the cases where harmonics are very well separated. It's the same thing for children. If a child has a F0 of 600 hertz and formants between 600 and 1 and the double 200 hertz, it's very difficult to find where it is without some filtering. We can filter the sound, Patricia, in order to eliminate some part of the noise or maintaining the harmonics and try to figure out where formants and harmonics are. But it's tricky, it's not very simple. I can have, how can someone learn to use PRAAT? Are there tutorials available to teach how to measure voice quality scripting? Yes, there are some tutorials in the internet and on the web page and PRAAT web page, there are information on that. And we have courses. For instance, next year we have a course of PRAAT script on March, remote course on March from our Association of Speech Sciences. PRAAT scripting. We have all my courses using PRAAT are in YouTube. You can find, I can write you the YouTube channel with the courses of acoustic phonetics using PRAAT. Then it's public. We have a lot of information in Portuguese, okay? But the courses next year will be in English. Which acoustic aspects of the voice are most strongly indicative of an individual profile or signature? Can this be investigated? Yes, of course. This is the case in forensic phonetics. In forensic phonetics is the opposite of linguistic phonetics. In linguistic phonetics, we are searching for what's common for the individuals in the linguistic community. In forensic phonetics, we are looking for what is particular to this individual that differentiates him or her from the other ones. And of course, you use PRAAT for that. But it depends on it can be formants, it can be laryngeal activity. In the case of speech, it could be the use of some discussed markers like tá ligado, né? That one person uses, the other one doesn't use. It depends on a lot of things. Some phonetic phenomena such as plástico instead of plástico, which causes rhotacism, or the way of realizing diphthongs, the way of use emphasis in prosody, a lot of different kinds of things. We can, I used to say that it's an ant work, trabalho de formiga. We need to pay attention of details of this particular person and see if he is or her is, or she or he is consistent, and try to use it as a signature of the individual. Mm-hmm. What are the advantages and disadvantages of natural voice analysis in context and experimental context? I don't know if I understood the question.
The question is about the origin of the sounds we analyze. We have any advantages in work with sounds in conversation, for example, in the natural context, because I think it's more easy to work about with the sounds produced and registered in experimental context.
Okay, understood. No, we use both. It's important to have, it's called lab speech, laboratory speech. It's important to have some experimental control because you can learn about contrasts, what the individual, the persons of a particular linguistic community are using in terms of linguistic contrasts. But as soon as you learn something from experience, from experiments, you can check it in more ecological conditions, for instance, from any spontaneous conversations, etc. Now, use both. We use both kind of things. Why use PRAAT? Because the cost isn't zero, because it's very light in terms of software. The scripting is very good. You have a lot of scripts in the internet for doing enormous kinds of completely different kinds of analysis. And because our community is using a lot, then now we can, how can I say, exchange scripts and information use practice. I don't know. I think it's very flexible in terms of doing analysis. We can modify everything. I use it with in collaboration with Patricia and her students, and it was very convenient, I think. I don't know, because I don't know the other ones. It's unjust. The comparison is not possible. I cannot say. But I used to use, in the past, I used the KLMetrics for doing that. And several analyses could not be modified because they were internal of the software. This not happens in PRAAT. You can do anything. How can someone learn to use PRAAT? Yes, I already respond to that. There are a lot of tutorials in the internet, free courses, and okay. I don't know if I replied to everything. Yeah, when we are looking for emotion, sorry, I don't know, emotion encoding vocalization, you can use abstract formats like, yes, you can. Several things are implicating emotion, not only format values, but F0, intensity, duration, every kind of acoustic parents is implied in emotions. To study baby cries and PRAAT seems useless because there are no formats. But formats are not everything. You can use the whole spectrum and extract information from this spectrum, which is called statistical descriptors, center of gravity, standard deviation, asymmetry, skewness, processes, every kind of information for differentiate baby cries. And I use it for differentiating inhalation, audible inhalation from different individuals. When an individual is doing things like that, because the vocal and the nasal tract are different, we can differentiate individuals from the spectrum of this inhalation. And this is very useful for forensic analysis. For instance, you can recognize a friend just by the fact, by coughing. I know that you know people that when they cough, okay, is this person coughing? But it's just from the spectrum from the information from this sound. It's the same for baby cries. I reason to not use PRAAT also would be its standard not set for adult voter trial. What is open? No, PRAAT is set for adults.
Plínio, can I just interrupt you 1 second? Could you just speak louder this question, because for our recordings after, we have to record the question, please. Thank you.
Okay. I was answering the question about the reason to not use PRAAT for adult voter trial. No, we use PRAAT all the time for adult voter trial, for children voter trials. Also, there are no standards for adult. You can change the parameters, the PRAAT parameters for any kind of voice. I change all the parameters for working with the animals. You can change input parameters for working with every kind of signal. I also use PRAAT as an example to work with breathing signal. It's very slow. Okay, inhalation and expiration. I can see in PRAAT, inhalation and expiration, it computing things from respiratory signals. Swen invited you to study speech in an evolutionary perspective. Okay, tell me more about that later. Thank you. Are you interested in I don't know. It depends on talking about people interested in evolutionary questions. Of course, I am interested in several things. That's why I'm here, because I work with Patricia and I work with individuals, forensic phonetics, emotions, different kind of things. I don't know the vocal tract length of an animal. What can I do to study performance? We can infer vocal tract length from different kinds of vocalizations. Yes, you can study performance. It's not simple to find at first, but you can infer vocal tract length. We have data on vocal tract length from some animals. We can infer the size of the head of a capybara, the size of the head of an elephant, of a rodent, and from there we can infer formant position. It's important vocal tract length, but I don't know the vocal tract length of this person that I illustrate to you at the beginning, and I can compute formants even without knowing that. Yes, I know Elan, and I use Elan for Brazilian Sign Language. But Elan doesn't have the functionalities that PRAAT has, because PRAAT is specific for sound. And Elan, of course, has the possibility of have videos, and they're better for combining videos and sound, but PRAAT is much better for acoustic analysis.
You can use two softwares both for the same data.
Yes, of course, we can I don't know if Elan with Elan can, of course we can import audio files in Elan, but I don't know if you can import text-rich objects in Elan. But I guess that's the response is yes. The number of formants, there's a rule of thumb that for speech at least, for every 1,000 hertz you have one formant for the first guess. But you can adapt by seeing in the spectrogram the number of gray, black areas from 0 to the maximum formant. Yes, with using it, we can use the spectrogram with an exact trace of the energy of all frequencies. And of course, for formants, you can use LPC or capture analysis. And you need to know at least for LPC, the number of formants, but not for the spectrogram. but you can change the number of formants and try different traces and see if the choice was correct or not by comparing with the spectrogram. I don't know. May I continue? You have, I think, 2 questions. Do you have any advice?
Plínio.
Sorry.
The time is okay. 2 questions, if you.
Do you have any advice about the automation of emotion recognition? You have heard about Claudio, for example, if it's a voice emotion. No, I don't know Claudio. I cannot answer to that. It promises to classify localization clusters and attributes automatically. Why is it not common to use something like that? Because it depends a lot on the training phase. I don't know what kind of data it uses, but it depends a lot on the training phase. It have a different kind of animal or a different expression of emotion. The results could be completely different. It's the case in humans. Okay, sorry. If you have more questions, I can answer that by email.
Naturally, you have received a record number of questions so far, I think, in the event. What is very interesting presentation. We thanks a lot for your generosity for present and response any questions. And now we can stop this section. Thank you very much, and
Thank you.
see you.
Thank you, Plínio.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your great talk. We had many questions, so sure you will have received many other questions on your email. Thank you, Fraulein, and very nice session. We have the next session. It will begin in a few minutes. I just want to remind you to fill the attendance list. That will be very important for us to have information on the participants, to know who are here with us. So please fill it, and it's very, very quick to do it. And I think we can start already. I will call here Vinicius Frazye David. He will be the moderator of this next session. Thank you, Vinicius.
So, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure to present our next speaker. Professor Claudio Possani is a mathematician graduated at the University of São Paulo. He has completed his master's degree and his Ph.D. on mathematics at the same university. Currently, he is a senior professor at the Institute of Mathematics and Statistics of the University of São Paulo. He has worked with geometry and topology, and more recently, he became interested in computational analysis of human voices, more specifically on the use of AI and mathematical models to measure resemblance of voices using twin designs. His speech will now show us part of his work. So, Professor, thank you. You can carry on with your speech.
Thank you, Vinicius. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to have helped to organize this meeting. And it's a pleasure to talk to you. I will change subject for a while. I will talk about twins. It's a research project that we are just starting. We are in that beautiful part of a research project where we don't know where we are and we don't know where we are going. And it's very delicious to be in this part. We are just trying to find a way to achieve a goal that we don't know exactly what it is. Of course, I'm a little bit joking, and I will show you what we are discussing. Well, the title of my talk is Zygosity Diagnosis in Adult Twins by Voice Resemblance. And well, before I talk about this specific subject, I will make a tour what is going on in the literature in the world about studies in twins' voices. I will talk a little bit about acoustics analysis, human recognition of twins by voice, and automatic recognition of twins by voice, something about forensic studies, everything about twins, and then finally I will talk to you. I will try to explain what we are trying to do in what we call zygosity diagnosis. In this kind of works, we are always dealing with voice recordings, and most of the time with two voices in the same pair of recordings. And when sometimes we consider the same person speaking two sentences, two sounds, and we say that the sample is a same speaker. I will indicate by SS. MZ means monozygotic twins, two different persons, monozygotic twins, saying something, and we have this voice recordings. If the twins are dizygotic, we call DZ. B I will use for non-twin singles, and US for unrelated speakers. Okay. Well,
Professor, if you can use a full screen of your presentation, I think it would be easier for the YouTube viewers to read what is on the screen. Start the presentation in PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's much better.
Okay. There's something. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Are you? Excuse me. Are you hearing an interview different from my talk?
No, we are just seeing you, but now you stop sharing your screen. I think YouTube has a delay, so probably you're hearing them.
Excuse me. Okay. You are hearing me, I think. There are not a lot of papers and studies about twin voices in the literature. It's very difficult to find results in this subject. It's quite new. The number of works we can find are increasing, but we don't have a lot of results. In what I call acoustic analysis, we find some studies that we could resume saying that are comparisons of phonetic parameters of voice recordings. There are different kind of recordings. I will talk a little bit about someone, and different softwares. PRAAT is one of the most used, but there are others. And this kind of studies, the authors generally compares the sounds of the twins. For instance, one of the most comprehensive studies deals about 13 twins and 13 control group, a control group of 13 persons, and analyzed the 10 acoustic characteristics to decide if they are similar or not. And well, they find that some characteristics are more similar in twins than in the other group. In a certain sense, this is what was expected, that twins, monozygotic twins, have voices that are similar than unrelated persons. Although these studies, in a certain sense, confirm what is expected, they are very important, because with these studies, we was able to learn what characteristics we should look for, what we should compare, and after all, I can say that these studies tell us that, well, monozygotic twins have voices that are more similar than unrelated persons, or the importance of genetics. And there are some outliers, and this suggests that some environmental factors are important, but in a lower level in the formation of our voices. And this is the resume of what I was saying. If you have registers of the same speaker, the features, the phonetic features are similar, more similar than the monozygotic twins, than dizygotic twins, than brothers, and then unrelated persons. And the questions here is how to deal with the parameters, which are the good parameters, which are the values that shows that something are similar or not, and how to understand the outliers, maybe the environmental factors. And these studies are very important, and I will talk about what I don't like in these studies. Well, there are a lot of other studies that I call recognition of twins. The question here is to say if the two voice recordings come from twins or not twins, or the same person, for instance. And the question here is how easy it is for humans to identify voices. And when we look about what there is in literature, we see that there is a small number of studies and with small samples. I can tell you, for instance, 10 twins have their voices registered, and unrelated person also making a trio of voices, but a small number, around 10. Then we had 10 trios, and a jury of human students of phonetic heard these trios of voice and said, well, which one was the voice of the unrelated person, with a very good level of corrected identification. It's not very surprised also, but it's important. We humans are able to identify in some easy situations if we are hearing a pair of twins or an unrelated person. Well, automatic recognition of twins by voice is a new field. Speaker automatic identification is very a well-established field. But can we identify monozygotic twins as the same person? This was one of the first questions that researchers were looking for. If one of these softwares, these systems of identifying persons was applied to a pair of twins recordings, would they say that it's the same person? And the answer is no. Twins are not identified generally as the same person. There are some other studies that are very interesting. For instance, voices and ears. There is an automatic system that is able to identify one twin from the other, even monozygotic twins, using voices and photos of the ears. They used the left ear as training, and then showed the right ear and voices to the system, and the system was able to identify which one between a pair of monozygotic twins. Very interesting. Voices are weaker as a system for identification than voices for more ears photos. This is also interesting result you can find in literature. Well, there are forensic studies. This is also a well-established field, and the focus here is in speaker identification. We could resume this saying that given two voices recordings, the question is, are they the same speaker? This would summarize what we think when we say forensic studies. If we have two voices, we want to know if they come from the same person. Well, and this is very important in juries and in legal issues. Well, and there are different metrics to be considered here, and in the other studies also. Euclidean distance or log likelihood ratio. Euclidean distance is very interesting. You make a very large vector of numerical parameters from the voice report, and typically more than 50 parameters. So you have a large vector composed by numbers that are normalized. And if you have two of these vectors, each one representing one person, you can calculate the Euclidean distance and try to use this to say if the voices are closer or they are apart. And log likely ratio is something sophisticated. I put here the formula. It uses a conditional probability, so a logarithmic of an expression that have probability. In this image, Z means the vector of one person, and gamma is a distribution of probability. And this formula compares, gives a metric to say if two voices are closer or not. One of the hypotheses is that if you apply the log likelihood to see, this is from two samples, two persons, A and B. A and B here are two persons, and I can calculate the log likelihood between these two persons by this formula. But after that, what we find is the ratio of these numbers. We calculate the mean of this number. And if we are talking about same speakers, it's expected that LLR would be greater than -1. For monozygotic twins, also, it is expected to be greater than -1. For dizygotic twins and brothers, the hypothesis that we study is that they are greater than -10. And for unrelated speaker, this number should be smaller than -10. And this is, the studies about this measure, this metric, confirms that's what really happens. This is a good hypothesis. It's being confirmed. All these studies that I showed, they worked with small samples. Some are based on comparisons of resemblances. Some of them deals with twins identification, and others saying if it's a twin or not, and other with speaker recognition, the forensic ones. I would like to change this framework. And I would like to say briefly that at USP we have the panel of twins. It's a project started by Professor Emma Otta. We have a lot of videos, images, voices, recordings. We deal with research projects. We organize USP twin meetings. And something very important, in this project, it was validated in Brazil a zygosity test. Very simple test with some questions, a small number of questions that can say if a pair of twins are monozygotic or dizygotic. It's very important. And in this panel, we have around, these are great numbers, around 100 pairs of adult twin voices registered. So it's a large number, greater than everything we find in literature. And so right now we are recording children. And I would like to say also that we have a bias in monozygotic pairs, but that's not a real problem for what I'm trying to do. I would like to change all this framework and make a new question. The question is it possible to decide if a pair of twins are monozygotic or dizygotic by voice? As I tried to show you, it was not so far considered in literature. It's something completely new. I oppose it clear, in a very clear way. Given a pair of voice recordings and the information that they belong to two different persons and that these persons are twins, I want to know if it is possible to decide about zygosity. It's important to understand how I changed the framework. I'm not trying to decide if the voices come from twins or not. That's previous information. Yes, they are voices of two different persons, and these two different persons are twins. I'm not trying to decide about that. What I'm trying to decide is about zygosity. Is it possible to say if this pair of twins are monozygosity or dizygosity? I'm trying two approaches. One of them is with acoustic analysis. We have to find the right parameters, use Euclidean distance or log likelihood ratio, and make cluster analysis and things like that. We try to do something like that, a previous approach, and the results were not conclusive. I can resume saying that we calculated Euclidean distance, and in the monozygotic group, it has a large range of variation, and in the dizygotic group, it is always large. So if we find that the distance in a pair of recordings the distance is great, we don't know what's going on. Maybe monozygotic or dizygotic. Another way of working with this is with deep learning and artificial intelligence. It's another way of working. We will try to teach the machine from the panel's data. We can show them which the voices records and say, well, these are the monozygotic, these are the dizygotic, and now try to understand how we have to do that. It's a kind of reverse cluster analysis. We are not looking for the similar. We say which are the similar and expect that the machine will understand how to separate which are the good parameters to be considered. And one of our goals is to mix the traditional test with the acoustic analysis to improve accuracy of the test. The traditional test sometimes is not able to give a correct answer. We have some indetermination situations. Maybe if we mix the traditional test with the voice analysis, we can improve the accuracy of our traditional test. And maybe also we will be able to say that, well, we can diagnose zygosity, but not with a certain probability of being the correct evaluation. And that probability would depend on the values that we could find in our sample. But all of these are new. We are trying to do that. These are the persons that are working together, Professor Emma Otta, Patricia, Sandra Luizio, Bruna Campos, Ederson, Vinicius, Ricardo Priest, and myself. We are in the beginning of this approach to this, to understand this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio, for your great presentation. Vinicius?
Thank you, Claudio. It was very interesting. I also work with doing design, so I'm very interested in where are you going, how far you can get on this research. So we have one first question here from Emma Otta. Claudio, thank you very much for your talk and for the research partnerships. I was thinking about the stimuli used for this analysis. Is it relevant if you use spontaneous or posed vocalizations or speeches, laughter or cry, like "Oi, meu nome é," or "Hi, my name is"? Can we use voice recordings made by twins and sent to us? Are high-quality recordings made in a lab necessary? I think this last part is do you have to record these things on laboratory with high control, or if the twins send us their voices, if that's enough?
Well, so far, the studies use very high quality recordings. What we find in literature, it's better to use very high qualified recordings, but we'll see in a talk in this afternoon that are new frameworks of researching that are using cell phone recordings to work with voices analysis. So I think so far the high quality is important, but as long as we improve the methods and the technologies, I think we will be able to do things with even not so high quality recordings. Maybe I am sure that we'll be able to use cell phones in the near future. And what kind of recordings, spontaneous recordings or not? I think this is also something that we don't know the answer, and we will have to go deep in these studies to understand. I think spontaneous recordings will be interesting, but so far we are trying to decide which are the parameters we should use. We are trying to decide how can we teach deep learning, artificial intelligent machine to work. So we don't have these answers with certitude. We are looking for this to understand the situation.
And another question, you said that I will paste here. You said it during your lecture that your group has several modalities of stimuli, videos, voices, photographs. Have you ever thought about comparing which of these modalities are easier for humans to recognize? Probably photograph, because we rely a lot on vision, and while other animals use a lot of smell and hearing. Do you think it's you would be able to compare this to see how much we are good in recognizing people by their voices? Is it close to vision? Maybe we are wrong. Maybe our voices are almost as good as our vision, our hearing. Sorry.
Yes, it's a very good question. Of course, in real life, we use a lot of informations. When you identify some person, you are not identifying by voice or by image or by the shape of his face. You are using everything in a global way. But that's very difficult to understand and to put it in, for instance, in an automatic system. And we are starting. We are just in the beginning of these studies. So we are trying to understand so far what's the importance of voice. But I mentioned a study that was very successful using ears, the image of ears to identify persons. So I think the answer is yes. If we could put in the system more things than on voices, we would be very able to decide about zygosity, of course. But we are this subject, this issue is very new, so we don't have so far the knowledge about what we should look for and how. Voice is very simple, and you see there is a large tradition in studying voices, recognition speakers, and this framework of voices analysis, the phonetics analysis, is very, very well established. And what's new is using this for twins. And we are learning to connect the twin studies with voices analysis. But I think in the future, and again, in the cell phone, you can send not only the voice, but you can send a lot of other informations. And I believe that in the near future, we will be able to do a lot of tests, sophisticated tests, using simple cell phones.
Vinicius, your microphone is off.
Vinicius.
Sorry. I think it's very interesting. I know that there are studies with smells and things for the future. Francisco Dionisio, first he makes a compliment, great talk and project, and then he asks, are there any work on similarity of voices among family members independently of their being twins, like father and sons, brothers, sisters, and etc.?
Now, actually, I don't know. As I was very interested in twins, my concern was about twins, and really I don't know. But it's a very good observation. I didn't have made that before, but I will try to see if there are students in this direction. But because they would be let us say a new category between brothers and unrelated speakers. It's a very interesting observation, Francisco. Thank you for that.
Yeah, maybe even another relations like cousins or things like half brothers. I think that would be very interesting. Mm-hmm. Another question I have is most of the measures you were analyzing, and a lot of speakers here, especially those researchers that work with another animals, non-human animals, uses measures like tone measures, duration. I would say simpler measures. I don't know if I can call them simple. I'm just saying they are simpler. Do you think it's possible to analyze things like prosody, accents, or other things that humans has? That's kind of. But I know other animals also have accents, but in humans, I think that maybe it's more different among people. So do you think we can use this kind of measures to compare monozygotic, dizygotic, or cousins, or whatever?
Yeah, there are two directions in these studies, and one of them is this direction that is very interesting. When we humans, we researchers, try to understand which would be the good parameters and how could we compare the poses, the accent that the persons have, and how these parameters can give us information about the similarity or the zygosity of the persons. But there's another approach, deep learning with artificial intelligence. We don't control the parameters. It's the machine that controls the parameters. So I would like to, but it is possible to have an artificial intelligent machine that could understand voices, and then I would like to ask the machine, "What did you did?" But the machine will not answer. So I don't want to abandon this framework you mentioned, that we try to understand which parameters would be important for understanding if a pair of twins are monozygotic or not. Again, your microphone.
I always forgot. Gabriel, Francesco Gabo put this, maybe not in the voice, but the way they phrase, like the rhythm, which I think may be very, very interesting aspects, very interesting measures, things to define this resemblance or not.
Yeah, sure. We don't know exactly which are the good parameters, but these parameters certainly will be important. The rhythm the person uses, the pauses, the accent, and things like that. We have to combine all these parameters to maybe be able to answer this kind of question. As I said in the talk, it's completely new. There is, I didn't find any research in this direction in the literature. No one. So far, apparently, no one who asked this question had some results to publish them. Everything I found in literature is what I described in this talk. I think it's a really new framework,
which opens a great field, a great opportunity for more researches and publications. And well, I have one last question. When we, just let me put here to make it easier. We know that many species, not only humans, modulate their vocalization during socialization, right? So birds do that, dolphins do that, and other mammals do that. And human voice is something that changes a lot during, from the early years to adulthood, especially male voices. I mean, of course, female voices also change, but because of the testosterone, male voices change a lot during the years, and because of the testosterone genetic aspects, but also because of socialization. When we are working with twins, it's very important the genetic variability, but also the context, the common context among twins, and the individual context of each of the twin or each of the brothers or cousins, as we talked a lot earlier. How do you think we can control this or target this kind of thing, like comparing different cultures, twins here apart? Do you have any clue on what can we do?
Yes, and the word is probability. One of my thoughts is that we will not be able to give a certain result just like a DNA test. But in some cases where the history of the life history of that persons didn't separate a lot these voices, we will be able to say, yes, they are monozygotic twins with a very high probability. And in certain cases where culture, education has separated the voices, we will not be able to have a assertive answer. And so we'll say, well, it seems they are monozygotic twins, but the probability that we have the right evaluation is not so high. I think the way I would control the environmental factors, the educational aspects and things like that, will reflect, in my mind, in this research project, into probabilities. DNA test has always the same probability. It's very rare that a DNA test have not so high probability of being correct. Almost every test has a very high, greater than 99% of probability that it's correct. It's not 100%, but it's so high that it can be used in legal issues, in legal questions, demands, to say, yes, this guy is the father or is not the father of this child. I think we will not have the same probability. But the way I would consider these questions, it would be using probability.
If you don't have more questions, just let me say this. Yeah, Francisco also asks again, maybe it would be nice to see voices of monozygotic and dizygotic twins are more similar than voices of brothers and sisters that are not twins. I will paste here.
This is clear in the literature, yes. One of the slides I showed that the analysis of same speakers have more similarity or almost equal similarity than monozygotic twins, but they are more similar, of course, same speaker. Monozygotic is more similar than dizygotic, and there is a graduation. This is very well established in literature.
Any clue on anything about brothers from different genders? I mean, a male and a female. Of course, the voices would be very different, but it's easier to match a brother with his sister than with another female or whatever.
Yeah, all these studies that we find in literature, as I told, they are interested in comparing resemblances, in identifying persons, identifying twins. So they don't use different genders. On the contrary, they always use the same gender because they are trying to understand some kind of analysis that would be not interesting in different genders. But that's another good question. What would be the similarities of voices in brothers of different genders or twins of different genders? And compare this with, let's say, dizygotic twins of same gender and different genders. Which phonetic features are similar and different?
Very nice. I would like to thank you, Professor Claudio, for your speech. Very interesting. A lot of questions and so much few answers. I think it's a great field that has a lot of future. I'd like to thank you. I don't know if you want to say something too.
Yeah. I'm very excited about this project exactly because that we have a lot of questions and we don't have answers. That's the most delicious part of doing research, when you are looking for the answers.
Great. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio, for your wonderful talk. It was exactly magnific topic. Well, we will have now a 10 minutes break, and the next session will begin at 10 minutes to 12, and we will be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Hello, good morning. So we are now starting again. I would like you to remind the attendance list that here is the link below the description of YouTube. So please fill it so we can know who are here with us. Thank you very much. Now we are starting the last session today, this morning. Then we will have another one in another link that is in the descriptive above the YouTube. Please enter by the other link. So I would ask Arnaldo Candido-Jr. to start. Thank you, Arnaldo. It's with you the word.
Thank you, Tanya. First of all, good morning, everyone. I would like to introduce Professor Paulo Hubert, who will be giving the talk Acoustic Event Detection. Professor Paulo Hubert has a bachelor degree from Statistics and Mathematics Institutos from University of São Paulo. He also has a master's degree and a PhD degree from the same institute. Currently, Paulo Hubert lectures at the Getulio Vargas Foundation and also researches at the University of São Paulo. Professor Hubert worked with probabilistic models and Bayesian methods applied to acoustic analysis since 2016. Professor Hubert, in the name of the organizing committee, I would like to thank you very much for accepting the invitation to present your work today. We have reserved 20 minutes for presentation and 20 minutes for question. You can start now if you wish.
Okay, thank you, Arnaldo. Good morning, everybody. I would like first to thank Professor Patricia, Bruna, and everybody for the invitation and the opportunity to talk. So I'm going to share my presentation here now, and I will be talking about detecting events and acoustic signals, okay, which is something that is very broad and it's a general subject, and I intend to talk about it in a broad and general fashion as well. So I'm going to divide my talk in three. It's divided in three parts. I'll start introducing the problem. I'm going to divide this problem of acoustic event detection in three classes, broad classes, and then I'll discuss one case study, which is the analysis of the acoustic landscape from the soundscape from Parque da Laje here in Brazil. Okay, so what is the acoustic signal? I think this is it's not news for everybody. The acoustic signal is the measurable effects of mechanical waves propagating in air and water, and what is an event? So if we're talking about detection, event detection, we must understand what is an event. So the signal, we assume that it has some variability and some variance all the times, during all times. But an event is the case when some statistical features of the signal changes in some time frame, from a given point in time. The statistical properties of the signal change, and then it comes back to what it was before at another time, and this time window is what we call an event. So it's a modification of some features, statistical features of the signal, which is a very general definition. So this is what we are going to talk or call an event. Okay. So to detect the event means here to estimate this the beginning and the end of this time window. So when does the statistical features change and when they come back to what they were before? And I'm going to divide this problem in three classes. I am being inspired here by the language of machine learning. It's a current area of research that receives a lot of interest. And I'm going to divide this problem in three classes. I'm going to talk a little bit about unsupervised event detection, which is the case when we don't expect, or we are not looking for any specific events. We do not have neither a model nor examples of what we are trying to detect, of what is this event, or in the sense of what are these statistical features that define the event. This is the unsupervised class of problems. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the semi-supervised, what I am calling a semi-supervised version of the problem, which is when we have a mathematical model of what we expect the signal to be, and we must then test if the signal contains, or the model is present or not in the signal. And the supervised version of the problem is when we have examples of what is the signal that we are looking for, the event that we're looking for. We have examples of that. So the unsupervised class of event detection, it is based on, I understand this problem in this sense. It depends on the segmentation of the signal. This is a class of problems in signal processing communities. We call it a segmentation problem. In the statistics community, we call it a change point problem, which is detect or estimate times when some statistical parameter describing the signal changes. So this is what we call it the segmentation. After we segment the signal, we divide it in slices. We must characterize each slice. So what are the features of this slice that define it? And the third step is to cluster these slices together to form groups that are similar. The idea to do that, or the goal when we do that, is we want to process long duration signals, and it's impossible to listen to them entirely to understand what's going on. So it's like a pre-process step where we divide the signal and group together small segments that are similar, and then the specialist or the researcher can listen to a few examples in each group and label it. So this is what the framework of unsupervised event detection. The semi-supervised event detection, as I said, is when we have a mathematical model for the signal of interest or the phenomena that we are interested in. And this can be either a direct model in frequency or time domain. It can be a differential equation or system of differential equations describing some physical system. Any kind of mathematical model that results in or teaches us about how the signal should be behaving when the event is present. And this problem usually takes the form. It's a problem very well known in the literature, and it takes usually the form of a statistical hypothesis testing procedure, where we test the hypothesis that the event is present against it's not present. This is, of course, there is some details that are important here, especially when we define the alternative hypothesis, which is noise only, because what is noise? We can define noise. Of course, we have the measurement device imprecisions that can cause noise. We have generally background noise. But if you're interested in one specific event, other events that might be present will be thrown into the noise as well. So it's difficult to define this alternative hypothesis. We're going to see that. And there are many challenges with that, and we have simultaneous events occurring at the same time. The noise, not often you know what are the characteristics of the noise, and so on and so forth. The last class of problems is the supervised event detection problems. I won't be talking a lot about this because this is an object of current research in our lab right now. I work in the Laboratório de Acústica e Meio Ambiente, Environment and Acoustics Laboratory with Professor Vinicius. And we have one master's student, which is Athos. He talked here earlier about this problem, so I will be talking a lot about it. It's when we have examples and we train a supervised model, machine learning model, either random forests or neural networks or something like that, to learn to recognize these events in new data. It has some challenges involved as well. If we use, for instance, convolutional neural networks, they work very well for images. So one approach that is very common in the literature is to convert the acoustic signal into an image by calculating the spectrograms or the Mel frequency cepstral coefficients and something like that. You transform the one-dimensional acoustic signal into a matrix, which can be seen as an image, and you apply the convolutional neural networks, for instance, to detect the event, to classify events. There are some problems with that. The convolutional neural networks they have some invariance that is not valid when we talk about spectrograms. It is when we talk about images. So a face is a face whenever it is in a picture, but an acoustic event, it's not the same thing if it is happening in the lower frequency or higher frequency regions. So this is what we are researching right now, how to adapt the method to drop these invariants, and what kinds of features are useful to use, etc. Also, we must have a lot of negative examples, these are the challenges that are related with the application of neural networks in general. You must have a very rich library of examples, both positive and negative. So to illustrate these problems, I'm going to use this example, which is this is the case of the research of my PhD research and some of my postdoc research as well. In the laboratory, we have a lot of equipment that the lab develops. One of them it's called Ocean Pod, which is a hydrophone that can record sounds underwater, and that's up to 350 meters. It can record 5 modes of audio, autonomous recording. It does not transmit yet. Our current version only records the signal. You have to dive in and recover it. And we installed one of these pods, one of the sensors, in January 2015 in the State Marine Park, Parque Marinho Estadual da Laje de Santos, which is a conservation unity about 30 kilometers off the coast of Brazil. It's an area with very high biodiversity and with many things happening in the area. We have lots of diving expeditions in the weekends especially, but there is also irregular fishing. It's not allowed. Fishing is not allowed in the park, of course, but especially in the late hours of the night, there are some boats and people that go there to fish. And one of the ideas of our project was to develop a boat detector to help fiscalization in the park. Okay, so this is the navigational chart, just for us to understand where the park is located. And what we had in January, or when I started my research, we had 10 months of continuous recordings. So it's 10 months of underwater sounds. Of course, it's not, it's impossible to imagine that someone is going to listen to that and stay awake. Very difficult. So it's not, we know that there are many things that might be happening there, but we do not know when. So this is the problem. We have, of course, a lot of biological events, such as fish choruses and even whales, maybe. We have, of course, a lot of anthropogenic events as well, fishing boats, the behavior of the divers that go there, and so on and so forth, and many unexpected things that might happen. So, but first, since our goal was to develop a boat detection engine, we started with the same supervised problem. The literature gives us some models for what is the irradiated ship noise, radiated noise from a ship, and we have a model for that, mathematical model in the time domain, which takes the form of a usual harmonic model, which is one of the difficulties with this, because this is a very general model that we're using here, but this is what the sounds of boats are like. Of course, if we are looking for specific boats, we would specify the amplitudes or the frequencies and the relationship between these parameters, specify it in more detail, but this is the general model. What we work is with this third equation here, where y of t is psi times f plus r. R is the noise. Noise is whatever happens in the signal that is not the event we are looking for, that is not the model in f, this equation here. And this parameter psi, it is the parameter that says it's a gain factor. We can treat it continuously as a gain factor. When it takes, it's a positive parameter. When it takes the value 0, it means that there's no noise. There's no there's no event in that time t. And it takes a value of 1. We could treat it as a binary variable if we want. And if it takes the value 1, it means that the signal is present. So the hypothesis we want to test is that psi equals 0. We have tried this approach and presented it in an event in 2017. It was published. It is published, the paper. The problem is the model is too general. This harmonic model, we had to adapt it a little bit, and we actually ended up using a chirp model where the frequency, the fundamental frequency, changes linearly with time. and that with that we can detect bolts that are approaching or bolts that are accelerating. We do not detect steady motors, steady engines, just ones that are accelerating. So it worked well in our data. Of course, it had some problems with processing time and some false positives. The difficulty was, of course, also to test this model, because we can look at the spectrograms and find bolts over here and there, get some examples to test the procedure, but it's very costworthy. It's a very difficult analysis. So that's why we went to the unsupervised detection part, which is when we take the entire 10-month signal and we want to estimate points in time where something interesting might be happening. And afterwards, we're gonna ask what is happening. First, we want to know when anything or something is happening. So our hypothesis here is that any event that happens, it will at least alter the power of the signal, which is in statistical terms the variance. So this is our hypothesis. I don't know what kinds of events I'm gonna look for, what these events are. What I know for sure is that when they happen, that signal power will change. This is a very it's a hypothesis that is it's very reasonable, because it will happen unless we have a perfect correlation between noise and signal, which is usually not the case. So it does happen when something new is going on. So there's the sounds of the waves. I don't know, when it starts to rain, the signal power gets higher. So when a boat passes by, the signal power gets higher. So our first goal is to detect these variance change points in the signal. We proposed a model that is based on first on a single change point case, which is from at a time t bar here, the variance of the signal is multiplied by a positive factor delta. We are interested in estimating this t bar. I'm gonna do it quickly because we don't have much time, but the details are in the paper. We use a probabilistic Bayesian model for that. A Gaussian model, we assume that we use a Gaussian distribution, which is not, of course, completely accurate, but it does not have to be accurate. It just represents our ignorance here, our uncertainty. So it's not linked to the physical characteristics of the signal, of the sound. It's just an uncertainty model. And the good thing here is that by using some specific prior distributions for the parameters, we can eliminate these parameters from the model, both the variance of the signal and the delta factor. The before and after variances, we can eliminate that from our model, because I'm not interested in estimating what is the variance. I'm interested only in estimating when it changes. So we do that here. Analytically, it's possible to analytically integrate out these parameters and arrive at this discrete distribution, posterior distribution for t bar. We can this here is using a flat prior for the times for the change point. We could use an informative prior if you want. And the thing is that this model, we are able to optimize it by direct inspection. This is very easy to parallelize, that's a difficult word. And we can estimate these change points, this single change point. And then here are some examples of the posterior of this equation here, calculated with simulated signals with different factors of variance change. Here, the variance changes, it increases by 10% at point in time 3,000, 4,500, and 6,000 at this time, specific times, and we see that the posterior is concentrated around the true change points. When the variance changes by a factor of 50%, the posterior is very concentrated, so it will work very well. We will estimate this change point very precisely. And of course, if the factor is even higher, the posterior is even more concentrated around the true change point. So this model of ours, it estimates a single change point, and then we apply it recursively for each segment. So we take the entire signal, estimate what is the point where the variance change is the greatest, and then we divide it. We take the two segments that this produces and apply the analysis once again, and segment each segment again, and we go on and on with that. This is our algorithm, and we stop. There is a stop condition based on hypothesis testing here. After we separate the segments, I estimate the time of change. get the two segments, and then I ask, are these segments really different? Are these variances really different? So we calculate a statistical measure. We use the full Bayesian significance test of Professors Júlio Sterne and Carlos Pereira from USP. And we stop when this hypothesis is not rejected. So the variances are not different. So then the algorithm stops. This is one example of a long signal where we have 15 minutes and a slow boat passing by. This is what we see in red in the bottom of the spectrogram. And we have some calibration we can do with our algorithm. We do that in the paper and discuss that in the paper. We use informative, strongly informative priors in this calibration step. So we can, because we are trying to, that's it. We're trying to calibrate the sensitivity of the algorithm. In this case, for instance, now it is taking too many segments from the signal, I believe. But we have some hyperparameters that we can calibrate and get something more precise like this. In a case where we have many events, the algorithm works very well in the sense that it really estimates the times where something is going on. We can see these events here are boats that are accelerating and stopping. So they turn the engine on and then off. And we can estimate very precisely the beginning and end time of each of these events. Of course, if we can diminish or make the algorithm less sensitive, and it will divide less, or we can make it divide more, depends on what we want. Here are some results because we have implemented our algorithm in Python or using the library Cython to get it to work really fast. These results are a little bit old. We have better results now. People, if someone is interested, we have the paper published and also in my GitHub, you can get the code for this algorithm, some examples as well. And what we do after that, we have the segments. So we estimate these times of these cutting times. And then for each segment, we calculate some, we characterize the signal in some way. We can calculate, for instance, the average spectrum. We can calculate the spectrogram, the MFCC. We can calculate the chirpogram. Chirpogram is a feature that was defined by James in a paper of 1987. James is a physics. He works with physics and then with probability models and statistics and Bayesian statistics, and applied it a lot to signal processing. So he defined this feature. It's based on the idea that the frequency can change linearly in time. So that's why it chirp. And after we choose some way to characterize the segments, we apply an usual cluster algorithm to cluster them together in groups. And then each group can be listened to. You can pick a few examples from each group and listen to them and understand what is going on. So this is what we did. This is what I did in my PhD thesis. You can look for details there if you're interested. And at last, well, this is the unsupervised version of the problem, which I worked a lot on this version in my PhD. And then finally, the supervised detection problem version is what I talked earlier. It's subject of ongoing research. The literature talks a lot about it. You have some literature on that, using usually MFCC, male frequency Seep-Stroke coefficients, and some, or either a neural network architecture or random forest architecture. It works well, but it has some problems. We are working on that now, especially we have the generalization problem as well. It's related to the richness of the set of examples that we have. You must have a lot of positive and negative examples with different conditions of background noise and so on and so forth. This is what Athos probably talked about earlier. And this is it. We didn't have a lot of time, so I just wanted to show you how we divide this problem, how we think about this problem of event detection in these three versions of it, and how we are dealing with each of these versions. So I would like here are the references that I used in this presentation. I would like to thank you all again for the invitation and the opportunity to talk. And thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hubert. Do we have some questions? I have one. We have some time for questions. Professor, from what I understood, the main application of your technique is to fight illegal fishing. Is that the main purpose?
Our first objective was that we wanted to design an efficient boat detection algorithm. We did that. We have a version of that. Also, another people working with the same data with Professor Vinicius, they created a different approach. We started with that goal, but then we went to a different one. We got very interested in this unsupervised detection problem because with that, as I said, it's a very long signal. And we know there's a lot of biodiversity, but we do not exactly know what species are there, what is really happening. So our goal changed to unsupervised detection, to detect things that are interesting or maybe unexpected from the signal. This is where we spend most time or the biggest effort in our research. And this problem not the goal of critical mode detection.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Rogério. Rogério says, when humans listen to two simultaneous sounds, even with overlapping frequency, or event detection software, that is our brain, is able to differentiate them apart. Does any of these methods can accomplish this after training? From what I understand from Rogério's question, he says that we are kind of unsupervised, our brain is unsupervised. If we find the unusual sound, we can recognize them. Then I think Rogério is asking specifically about your unsupervised approach. The unsupervised approach can detect, for example, any kind of non-expected sounds beside the white noise, or?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I believe that when he talks about overlapping frequencies or simultaneous events, so in the unsupervised setting or algorithm, it will detect whenever the power changes. So if the events are not starting at the same time, it will detect this change point. So the first event starts, then the second one, and it will pick this time of when the second event begins. Even if they have overlapping frequencies, this algorithm is looking for changes in power. There are other versions that look for changes in the spectrum of the signal as well. But this is some, I think that our equipment, our brain, we are equipped also with memory, and short-term memory, in the sense that even if we have overlapping features or the same features in two events or features that are similar, they are usually, if all features are similar, are the same, then the events are the same. There's no way to tell them apart. There must be some difference. And if we know that in the semi-supervised setting, for instance, you can design your model to only detect signals with a given, for instance, some amplitude that changes over time. You can have the model that you want. In this sense, yes, these algorithms will be able to detect even simultaneous or events with overlapping frequencies or features that are similar. In this sense, yeah.
Your microphone, Arnaldo, it's off.
I'm sorry, my mic was off. Thank you. Daniel is asking, how did you measure the sign in the water? What kind of device do you use?
Okay, we have in the lab, LACMA, Laboratory Acoustics and Environment Laboratory at the Polytechnic School in University of São Paulo. We develop and we build the sensors. So we used an ocean pod, we call it. It's a hydrophone that we developed in the lab. You can go to the web page, you can search for LACMAM, LACMA, and then you can see more details there. But it's a proprietary, it's our sensor that we developed and built in the lab. Okay, I think this.
Thanks. Laine is asking, I found it great, especially the application. I will repeat the question I directed to Athos. How to train event detection when you have an initial sample that is small and variable?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. I could answer the quick version. Maybe will be you won't, or you can't. You're going to have a very high error rate. It's difficult. What we are thinking of in our research, we want to maybe take a hybrid approach where we have the semi-supervised setting again and together with the supervised set. So we have examples, and we also have a model or some kind of model that can help us even in the absence of good examples. So if you do not have a very rich class or set of examples, the usual machine learning supervised methods won't work well. They will usually you have a very high false positive rate. So one approach will be to use a hybrid version, use the samples that we have, but complete it or augment it with a model, mathematical model, or with simulated data, for instance. All these things are possible.
Okay, great. Just a correction. The last question was asked for by Patricia and not by Laine, as I said. Rogério is elaborating on his question. He says, more specifically, if we listen a bird and a cicada singing at the same time and at the same frequency, we are able to identify and separate them. Does any supervised technique is able to do so? This is his question. I think it just has a relation with the sound envelope.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Athos is working in this problem, not these birds, but with bird detection. I said, if you have the same amplitude in the same frequency at the same time, how can we distinguish these two birds? Because usually the amplitudes, the distribution of power, the spectrum is not exactly the same. You might have the same fundamental frequency and the same harmonics, but with a different shape of the amplitude function. So this is why, or how we can detect or get these two detectors apart. We have these two birds singing at the same frequency. It's not, because I believe it's not exactly the same frequencies with the same distribution of power, with the same power spectrum distribution. If they have the same, I'm not familiar with that. I do not know if we humans can distinguish sounds that have the exact same power spectrum. If we do, then I don't know how we do it. But I believe that if there is there must be some difference in the power spectrum, and then we can train a model to detect that. And so just to complete, and this can be sometimes as well the difference in time, because the birds, they can sing at the same frequency, but one just does one tweet, beep, the other does three, beep, 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 or something. There are more complex structures when you take a wider picture in time. There are another structures that define or differentiate one bird from another, and we can use that. Athos will be using that, not in this current version of his research, but we look forward to use that as well, to use the different time frames.
Okay. Danielle is asking, do you think to use a three-signal to make a triangulation? I think his question is about detecting the sound in origin.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I talked about detecting the event in time and not in space, because of course, we would have to have at least 3 sensors to make a triangulation. We didn't have it. We had one sensor, that data from only one sensor. We developed in the lab, we stopped with that line of research at some point in time, but it is possible to use a single sensor and move it around in a circle and use the Doppler effect to try to estimate or to do a fake triangulation with one sensor, but one that moves in a circle. We tried that a little bit, but we understood that we would have to have a lot of energy in this movement to be able to detect with some precision the distances. But we thought about that, Daniel, but we didn't have we didn't have these three sensors available. And that's okay. I'm going to complete it again as a different problem, a very important one. Okay, I know there's a vote. I know when. And now I want to know where. Of course, it will be very important. We didn't get to that point.
Rogério, so I'm sorry. Rogério, thank you for the question. He comments that it would be very useful for those folks working with automated acoustic monitoring in biodiversity-rich environments, such as tropical forests. Gabriel comments, I think that to locate the signals and to record them, there is a technique called acoustic tomography with a range of mics. Then I think it's a more advanced case of triangulation, because the proposal is to use acoustic tomography. Okay, I have a question, one question as well. I would like to ask you, in the sense of unsupervised methods, do you have used the multi-clustering? Is that correct? Have you considering using anomaly detection techniques?
Yes, it is something that we could or we considered. I didn't actually implement it and tested it with the data we have, but it's a possibility. We also when I talked about cluster algorithms, I'm talking about the clustering happening afterwards. So I have the entire signal, and after I have it entirely, then I define the segments, characterize them, and then cluster them together. One thing that we wanted to try as well is a real-time clustering algorithms in this sense. So we're monitoring the signal. When we detect some important change of some feature, we immediately define a new segment, immediately we characterize it, and we must compare it with what we already have, the group we already have, and decide if we can allocate this new event to a group that there is that we defined already, or if we need to define a new group. I think this will be a clustering algorithm that would happen online in real time, when processing the signal in the same axis of time of the signal acquisition. This is something we tried, and then we would probably use exactly these kinds of techniques of anomaly detection.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hubert. I think here we are in the time limits. Once more, thank you for your beautiful explanation and very interesting work. It's kind of somewhat unusual, because you are analyzing water sounds. It's something we didn't see every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for the opportunity, and I just want to finish by saying that in the lab we have lots and lots of data from underwater environments, from earth environments as well, from land environments as well, forests and different ecosystems. And if you need data, want to research on that, you are all welcome to reach us, and we can always discuss collaborations. We really want to get that data to use. Okay, we do not have the capacity of process it entirely. So feel free to contact me if anybody that's interested. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your great talk, Paulo. It was very nice hearing and having you here today with us. So now it was the last session of this morning, and we will continue after lunchtime, and we will return at 2 o'clock on the evening. Just to remind you that it will be in the different link. So the link is here on the descriptive YouTube, together with the schedule. We will return at 2 o'clock with the talk of Professor Marcelo Finger, that is Detecting Respiratory Insufficiency by Voice Analysis, the SPIRA project, with the moderator, Professor Cláudia Peixoto from the Institute of Mathematics and Statistician of São Paulo, University of São Paulo. Would you like to say something, Patricia, Emma, Professor Claudio?
I would like also to thank Paulo and Arnaldo for this interesting talk. I learned a lot. And after lunch, we come back.
Yes, I would just like to say that it was a great talk to close this morning session. Thank you a lot.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you. I enjoy it a lot.
Thank you all. So we will return at 2 o'clock. Thank you. And for those who not filled the attendance list, please fill it. It will be very quickly. Thank you very much.